Hey everyone, it's Alex Martinez and Ryan Zomorodi. We're the founders of realestateskills.com, and today we have an awesome video for you. We're going to dive deep into Real Estate Comps 101, specifically for wholesaling and flipping real estate. We're going to dive into what are real estate comps, how to find real estate comps. We're going to dive into our Real Estate Skills comp criteria cheat sheet, the rules we've been using for over 12 years to effectively wholesale and flip houses across the United States. So be sure to download this, follow along. You can get it at realestateskills.com/comp, and it'll be in the description as well. So Ryan, let's dive into it, man. You ready to rock?
Yeah, let's do this, Alex. I'm ready.
All right. So first off, before we dive into comps, we really have to take a step back and dive into our big three numbers when it comes to wholesaling and flipping real estate, because that will show the importance of why we want to find real estate comps. So you want to start us off on our big three?
Yeah, absolutely. This is a great place to start because if you don't have these big three numbers, then you're not going to know how to properly make an offer, and you're not going to properly know how to pursue a deal that's going to ultimately be profitable. So the first of which is the ARV, otherwise known as the after repair value. The second of which is the repair costs, otherwise known as the rehab costs, right? The budget for construction on a fix and flip. And the third is the purchase price, right? We want to determine what the purchase price is to make sure that it's going to be a profitable buy, fix, and sell project, right? A fix and flip. So shall we dive into all three of them?
Yeah, let's do it. So, ARV, and for any wholesaler and flipper to be worth their salt, they got to know these numbers, right? This is the skill of being an effective wholesaler and fix and flipper. If you can't determine an ARV, if you can't determine the repair costs, you're not going to be able to determine your purchase price nor your wholesale fee, and know where the best place to offer for you to make your desired wholesale fee and for your cash buyer to make a profit. So this is the skill set. I think a lot of people skip over this step. They try and hijack it with software and use software and not actually develop any skills in this area, where these are absolutely vital. So I just want to mention that. But yeah, let's dive into the ARV, the after repair value, just at the top.
Yeah, ARV stands for after repair value. And in the context of rehabbing and adding value to properties, this is ultimately the projected value of a given property after it's been fully renovated to current market standards. So we're trying to determine what a given property can sell for, really the ceiling of value that a given neighborhood, a given property can realistically command today if we were to rehabilitate the property, to redevelop it and make it shine, right? Make it renovated to the standard that the most renovated comps in the area can ultimately demonstrate to us. So this is the number of the big three numbers that will involve real estate comps. This is where we do pick and pull from the best data we have in our marketplace to tell us what this value is going to be after repair. So we start with the ARV because we want to reverse engineer the deal, right? The ARV can also be thought of as the total gross proceeds of a sale, right? When you think about it, you buy a distressed property, you fix it up, and then you want to sell it for top dollar on the market once all the renovations are complete. So when you make that sale, this is the number that is the top line revenue that you as a fix and flipper, or if you're a wholesaler, your cash buyer is going to achieve after they fix it up and then resell it. So we reverse engineer by saying, hey, this is the total amount of value that we can achieve on the resale. And then we want to back out from that and subtract our transactional costs, subtract our repair costs. And then even if we're going to wholesale it, subtract our wholesale fee to then determine what is the purchase price that we as either a buyer, as a real estate investor, or as a wholesaler need to secure the property for under contract to then move forward and have a profitable exit. So that's really the ARV. And again, we'll dive into how to pull real estate comps, what are the best characteristics of real estate comps, but the after repair value is supported by real estate comps. So that's really the first one, and it's arguably the most important one, because if you get that wrong, as you can see from the calculations I just described, then everything else will be off. So that's what we're really going to dive into today, and really what our comp criteria cheat sheet will help everybody understand is how to determine the ARV on any given property that you're looking to fix and flip or wholesale.
And just to add some color and context, you and I weren't perfect at determining an ARV when we first started real estate. It takes practice, right? There's a lot of characteristics that we're going to get into that you need to look out for in different real estate comps to determine the value of what the future sales price will be for your property. And there's a lot of assumptions when we start out that we think, oh, this property here, this 5-bed, 5-bath house, that's just like my 2-bed, 1-bath house over here. And we get into a lot of trouble in the beginning, but we wholesale effectively. We don't want to purchase a property or do a fix and flip deal, without being confident in these numbers. And this is, just add a little more color, why we want to start wholesaling real estate, why I recommend starting to wholesale real estate. Because if you do get your ARV wrong, let's just say you estimate it was $600,000, it's actually $500,000. That directly eats into your profit. And if you had a $50,000 profit at the end of the day, estimated, you're actually going to lose $50,000. And so that's the importance of the ARV. You don't want to get it wrong. It's extremely important to understand. And, just from what we've seen too, you can't plug this into some random software and get an accurate ARV. You got to be able to understand, okay, what the heck is it? And then from the ARV, we then go into repair costs, which how about you dive into repair costs a little bit too?
Yeah, absolutely. So every property is going to have a different amount of repair costs depending on how distressed it is, how large the property is, what level of finishes are required to sell that property for top dollar after it's been repaired. So again, the second number is repair costs, otherwise known as rehab costs. So it's the total estimated construction budget required to fully renovate the property, as well as fix any deficiencies that a resale buyer is going to want to have fixed. So, for example, changing the roof, changing the flooring, updating the cabinetry, installing new appliances, and fixing other mechanical issues, installing new HVAC, plumbing, electrical issues, making sure that everything works and it's functional first and foremost. But then you also want to make sure it looks beautiful, right? You want to make sure that a buyer comes in there and is just wowed by how it looks like, right? So there's a design element to the repairs as well, but ultimately it's capturing all of the costs of repairs to not only rehabilitate the property to make sure it's functional and will qualify for financing, but also to make sure that it's going to sell for top dollar and it's going to sell quickly on the market.
Yeah, perfect. And if anyone didn't catch it yet, there's repair costs and then after repair value. So they go hand in hand together, right? That's the R in ARV. And so that's the repairs needed to put a property to current market trends to sell at the ARV. Once again, this is another number that beginners get wrong all the time. I mean, more often than not, they're going to be underestimating repair costs, not knowing the true repair costs needed. So this does take a little bit of practice to get down. And then once we get the repair costs, let's talk about the purchase price.
Yeah, so the purchase price of a property is ultimately what you are going to be offering to buy the property. What's your acquisition price of a given piece of real estate? So this will largely depend on your business model and your investment strategy. So if you're a wholesaler, you also need to factor in what's in it for the end buyer, right? If you're wholesaling a property to a cash buyer, then you need to understand, what's the adequate price for that buyer to purchase it, to repair the property, and then still have meat on the bone at the end of the day. They need to make a profit for an investor to buy this property, spend the time, spend the money to rehabilitate it, and then ultimately take the risk of putting it on the market for resale, right? So you need to make sure that not only it works on paper, but you have the substance to back it up as far as having the right real estate comps in place, and then having enough margin to repair the property and make a profit. And again, if you're wholesaling the property, you also need to back in your wholesale fees. So you need to factor in if you're going to be charging an assignment fee, or if you're looking to immediately flip the property via a double close, then you need to make sure that you've already factored that into your purchase price.
Yeah, absolutely. And all of these numbers are contextual, right? That's why we wanted to cover this first. We'd be doing a disservice if we didn't dive into all of these numbers, the ARV, the repair costs, the purchase price. If we didn't dive into those, no one would have the appropriate context on why real estate comps are important, right? We start with the ARV, and how we find the ARV, how we use real estate comps is so we can find the ARV. So let's now dive into the technical side of what are comps in real estate and why are they important?
Yeah, absolutely. I also wanted to mention on the big three. So there's a common misconception amongst newbie investors and wholesalers that there's only one after repair value on a property, that there's only one repair number on a property, and there's only one purchase price that makes sense. But these are all opinions. These are all subjective. So what an ARV is, it's an estimate, it's a projection, it's an opinion of value. So it's not like a fact that, this property has one ARV that I'm estimating here, and that's all. It's you might ask 3 different appraisers what a property value is, you might get 3 different answers. And the same with the repair costs, right? You might have the same scope of work to rehab a property, and you talk to 3 different contractors, you might get 3 different numbers. And then purchase price, right? Depending on what kind of profitability you're looking for in a deal. How much are you going to charge as a wholesale fee? What's the intended use of that property, and what profit margin are you willing to accept? You might have a different purchase price. So those numbers are malleable, and just depending on your model and how much data that you have at hand, the quality of your data, then you might get different numbers. But just wanted to mention that there's not just one number that is true and unique for each property. It's like it just depends on how you're looking at a particular deal. So,
great point. And just to preface the next section on exactly what you said, comping and finding these properties, finding these numbers, we like to say it's part art, part science. We can break it down on a scientific level and have, a quantitative analysis on plus 1 bathroom, minus 1 bathroom, and make those differences there. But also there's a qualitative approach of understanding the feel of an area and how that can change an ARV. The feeling and emotions of an end buyer can change the ARV on a house. And so great point knowing that, hey, the ARV, is it always static? No, it can be variable. Variable at the time of the year, Is it December? Is it cooling off? Is there snow? Is it snowing in this area and not a lot of people are moving? Or is it summertime? Kids are out of school and now we're moving. There's a lot more buyers, right? So great point there for context.
Yep. So to answer your question, what are comps in real estate? Why are they important? So comps are comparable sales, right? It's a short term for comparable sales in real estate. And what are comparable sales? They're properties that are similar to the subject property with similar characteristics and location and different features that make them comparable to each other within a similar market area. And so for wholesalers, for flippers, we use real estate comps to create a basis of value, right? A fundamental value on any given property. We need to compare to other similar properties. So real estate comps are, again, other similar properties in a market that have sold, which gives us a data point to then form our opinion of what the value is going to be on any given property. So I like to say the comps are data points. The comps are the facts in the data, and then we use those facts to then form an opinion of what the value is and what it can be in the future. So why is that important, right? So if we're fixing and flipping a property, right, we're projecting what is going to happen in the future. So an after repair value is looking into the future by looking at today's data. So we always want to imagine that if we're buying a piece of real estate and renovating it overnight and relisting it tomorrow, what can we sell that for, right? And the only way we're going to know that is by looking at the data and making a rational, logical, and substantive decision based on what we have available to us. I always like to say that deals are in the data.
Yep.
And so when you have the best data, when you as an investor empower yourself to take that data and make rational decisions, that's how you can form an advantage, and that's how you can feel confident in real estate investing, right? Like we never rely on automation and software to tell us what a property's worth today or what it's going to be worth in the future, right? That's one of the things in real estate investing that you really cannot automate, that AI is not going to take over. It's the art and the science, right? It's taking the facts, but then also knowing more about your market than other people do, or just knowing more about the data that is available, which can give you an advantage. They say you make your money when you buy in real estate, right? You buy properties under market value, and then you can add value to them and still earn a profit margin. So if you don't know what other relevant properties, right, other similar properties are selling for, then how are you going to know what to pay for a property? How do you know what a good deal is?
Yeah.
So you can't at all. So it's like you can buy a piece of property, but then how much are you going to pay for it, right? People ask us all the time, is this a good deal?
Yeah.
Is it a good deal? The first thing we say, all right, well, let's look at the comps.
Yep.
You have to look at the real estate comps.
And I like what you said about finding comps too. It allows you to predict the future. The better you get at predicting the future sales price, the better real estate investor you're going to be. And on the ARV, I'm always trying to be plus or minus $10,000 when I'm estimating an ARV and utilizing these comps. Right? There's always we're going to get into different characteristics, but there's always some judgment calls that you're going to need to make. And I think that with real estate comps, the more practice you get, and maybe you're putting deals under contract and submitting them to cash buyers and getting real life feedback, the more feedback you get from cash buyers that are actively doing fix and flip deals, maybe they're challenging your ARV or agreeing with your ARV, that's going to make you a better wholesaler at the end of the day. And I think there's so many people stuck in theory land that aren't taking action out there, that are always asking like, what about this ARV? What do you think about this? Is this a good deal? Is this a bad deal? And they're not sticking to the principles. They're not sticking to the comp criteria. They're not getting any real life feedback. And, my first deal that I ever put under contract that I tried to wholesale, I wasn't able to wholesale it. I put at too high of a price. The ARV was inaccurate, but I got real life feedback. And now the next deal that I did get under contract, I was able to wholesale it. And so just for anyone listening, right, when utilizing real estate comps, when trying to determine the ARV, we have to get that practice. You have to get out there if you want to be serious in this business. And this just, once again, right, if you mess up on the ARV and the comping, and right, you watch a HGTV show and you want to fix and flip a house, there's a lot of risk. There's a lot of risk with doing a fix and flip deal when the ARV is the most important number and you don't know what you're doing and you're using some random software to determine the ARV and you don't know the difference between a 3-bed, 2-bath house and a 5-bed, 5-bath house. It's a lot of risk there.
Absolutely. And, as you go down the rabbit hole of understanding real estate comps, you see that there's a lot of factors that impact real estate values. So if you're serious about buying a piece of property and flipping it, especially if you're taking it down yourself, but even as a wholesaler, you want to understand through the lens of a fix and flipper, you have to understand the nuances of properties, which we're going to get into in just a moment, of how we really dissect each particular property and understand, why does one piece of real estate sell for more than the other? What makes one property more comparable to my property than the next one? So it's all about having an eye for your market, your neighborhood, understanding what kind of structures are built on pieces of land in your area, what's the architectural style that's more desirable in your market, when were properties built in your market, what are the other factors impacting value in an area, and so we'll get to some of those factors in a moment, but really the core of when you're running a real estate acquisitions business, you're wholesaling, flipping, it's getting that data and then ultimately understanding which properties are going to indicate what the value is of a piece of property that I'm pursuing for a wholesale or not, right? Because you could, like to your point, Alex, if you're looking at the wrong comps, you're going to come up with the wrong value, and that can completely make your project unprofitable, right? And the last thing we want for anybody is to get into a bad deal and spend, 3, 4, 5 months, maybe even over a year of your life on a project only to lose money, right? We've heard many horror stories. And like I've been in deals where I've lost money too, like for a number of reasons. I know you have. And so we bring this from a wealth of experience and just understanding the importance and really knowing what a good comp is versus a bad comp can make or break your real estate investing career. Yeah,
great points, man. And let's dive into these characteristics and of properties we're pursuing now. And the differences and how it can affect value. And then additionally, how I look at this in a visual way is when we're doing real estate comps, we want to find apples to apples. And a lot of the times, if a property is too different, you're now comparing apples to oranges and some different fruit. And now when you have a true red apple, 3-bed, 2-bath, 1,200 square feet, and a model match, it's another red apple, and that's what we're always looking for, but it's not always going to be the case. You may get a pink apple or a green apple, but a lot of similar characteristics. And so that's the way I like to use the analogy of what we're looking for here. There's always going to be differences. We're not always going to have that exact model match, always exactly find a property just like ours, but we can find similar, comparable properties. That's the goal here.
Definitely. Yeah, you can't compare a car to a motorcycle when you're looking at different types of assets, right? You have to find as similar a property as you can. Yeah. And of course, there's going to be scenarios where you don't have the exact same red apple versus a red apple. Yeah. So we'll kind of cover some of those nuances and what to do when you can't find real estate comps. But let's talk about what are the characteristics of properties to consider when you're running real estate comps and finding those best comps.
Yeah. I mean, first off, right, the type of property, right? We like to focus on detached single-family houses, residential houses, right? There's a lot of house flippers. We like to focus on those properties because we specialize in them and because there's a lot of house flippers that we can wholesale our deals to. However, when some people are looking at real estate comps, they may start to look at commercial real estate and office buildings and then duplexes and triplexes and mobile homes. And if our subject property we're analyzing is a detached single-family house, we want to find other detached single-family houses. Like that analogy I used of different fruit, right? A commercial building, like that's a grapefruit, right? It's not going to match up with our apple. And so there's all those different types of properties out there. And right, if you're wholesaling houses, stick to houses. And how many times do we have people come to us and say, oh, you know what? I found this piece of land. I have no idea what I'm doing. And then a week before they told us, hey, I want to wholesale and flip houses. And we're like, stick to one product, as we like to call it. Mm-hmm. And they're trying to compare apples to oranges. They're trying to do different things. They're confusing themselves. And they haven't really mastered one type of product, the single family house. And so there's all those different types of property. So stick to that type of property when you're comping it.
Exactly. Yeah, you want to really master a type of asset before you jump ship and move to something else. Real estate's one of those industries that you can get shiny object syndrome even just within residential real estate. Right? There's all sorts of types of properties. So when it comes down to it, if you're finding comps for any particular piece of real estate, whether it's a detached single family house, a condo, a townhome, a mobile home, like you want to find comps that are the same type of real estate. Mm-hmm. And that can be as simple as just filtering out types of properties that aren't the same. Yeah. And that way you're not wasting time trying to peg a value from a mobile home to your single family house and vice versa. We've seen a lot of people, they say, hey, I've got a mobile home under contract and I use detached single family houses in the same neighborhood as the basis for my value. Like that just doesn't work. It's a completely different type of property. It's a different type of buyer, sometimes even different type of financing available. So all of these kind of factors make it to where you really have to focus on the same asset type, right? Yeah. Even a townhome is not comparable to a condo, right? Because they're just different types. Even though they share walls with their neighbors, it's kind of similar. They usually have HOAs or COA fees, but they are different types of real estate. They're legally defined differently, and thus their value is quite different. So that's really the first one, is like the type of property needs to be the same as your subject property. And if you look at any appraisal, they're never going to use a fourplex to comp a single family house. It's just they're two different fruits altogether.
Yeah, absolutely. And so let's say, hey, okay, we get it. We got to focus on houses if we're comping houses, right? Now there's different types of houses, right? There's brick houses. There's colonial type houses. There's ranch style houses, one floor, wide base. There's Victorian houses. There's Spanish style houses. A lot of those are in San Diego with stucco and those Spanish tiles, right? There's different types of houses. And right, if you have a brick home, you may not want to compare that to the Spanish style home with a Spanish tile, right? And so now we're getting levels deeper, because now we're looking at apples, but now we're trying to find like the same shade of apple, right? Cool. We narrowed on houses. Now we want a similar style, right? Is it 3 floors or 2 floors or 1 floor, right? And so that's another type of characteristic. And then how big is the house? One of the most important ones, in the comp criteria, we're not trying to go find real estate comps that are either too big outside of our subject properties square footage range, right? If we have a 1,200 square foot house, roughly we're going to be looking around 1,000 to 1,400 square feet houses, right? So if your subject property is 1,200 square feet, don't be using a 600 square foot 1 bed 1 bath house as your comp. Stay away from that, and don't be using a 3,000 square foot structure house as your comp as well. It's not comparable in that sense with these characteristics.
For sure. And, different sizes of houses are going to attract a different type of buyer pool, right? You need to know your customer, right? And so when you're getting into much larger properties, bigger footprints, that attracts a different type of buyer. Maybe families are looking to get in there. When you get into different types of, like smaller properties, now you're attracting maybe a couple or a single individual looking for properties. So depending on your market and the type of property size, then there's going to be more or less demand, and thus that's also going to impact value. So the closer you can stick to that same footprint, then you're going to just be a lot better off when it comes to replicating that value, right? We're looking basically for substitute types of properties that we've seen trade on the market already, because that's going to be the strongest indication of value for any given property. So yeah, we like to keep it within plus or minus 20% of what the subject property is. And so again, that means if we have 1,000 square foot property, then we don't want to look at properties that are above 1,200 square feet in size, as well as below 800 square feet as well. So roughly that's what we look for. Of course, there's some exceptions, but as long as you can keep it within that, you should be in good shape.
Absolutely. And then we got bed bath count, right? If we're looking at a 3 bed 2 bath house, we want to find other 3 bed 2 bath houses. We're not looking at the 1-1s, the 6 bed 6 bath houses. Right, those are other characteristics that we need to look at and understand. Even the floor plan, right? We've seen some funky layouts in our day.
Yep.
We were just looking at that property where the bathroom was, it was a 2-1, and the bathroom wasn't in the master bedroom or the other bedroom, and it really wasn't desirable as a house, and it was really hard to comp. There weren't a lot of comps of 2 bed 1 baths with the bathroom not in the house. And so those are other factors to consider: the floor plan, the lot size, right? How big is the lot size? Do you have a huge yard? Can kids play in there? Or is it very compact? What are we working with,
Yeah. And in some markets, a larger lot can command a significant increase in value, especially if you're in a dense urban area where there's a lot of development happening. So large lots can be very coveted. But in other areas, a large lot can swing, half an acre plus or minus and not make a significant impact in value just because there's an abundance of land. So again, that kind of comes down to knowing your market. If you're in a denser, well-populated area, larger lots are probably going to command a premium. If you're in a rural area with abundant land, then probably not as much. But it is important to find comparables that have similar lot sizes, again, similar location, similar footprint. So you can tell there's a theme of, finding the same types of properties with these characteristics. So lot size is very important, but also we want to find properties that have been built around the same time as well. So we call that the build generation. So, because things have changed significantly over the decades, I own properties that were built in the 1800s, early 1900s, and those things have, lead-based paint, asbestos. They have, materials that we just aren't even allowed to use anymore. So building codes have changed, over the decades so that we can use more modern materials. Like in some cases, they're even more expensive now. But, so over time, things change quite a bit. And so we want to choose properties and comps that are built around the same year. So within, 10 years, 5 to 10 years is ideal. And because, factors like, ceiling height, like the size of bedrooms, and, so other factors, building materials and whatnot, that can significantly impact the desirability once you go to resell. And a lot of times fix and flippers are not budgeting to change all of these materials. So unless they're doing a full gut, there's going to be a lot of these materials that convey and might command a lower price. So again, just keeping it as similar in year built is going to make a big difference in getting a comparable value.
Yeah, because we've seen it hundreds of times, right? We see a property that's built in 1920 as a subject property, and someone's using a new build in 2024 as the ARV comparable. And it's just a little too different, right?
Totally.
It's way too different. So great points there. Then garage and parking. This is a huge factor, right? You're analyzing a property that's got a 2-car garage versus one that doesn't, and especially in areas where you get the seasons and you want to keep your car nice and fresh and not ruined from snow or rain or sleet. That's another big factor on these houses. So, when comparing these properties, does your property have a carport, a garage, a driveway? Is there even street parking? All factors to consider. And then even amenities. I call the amenities like a large master bathroom in the property. Does it have a pool, a basketball court? Hardwood floors versus not. What are we working with here?
Yeah, and I like to kind of categorize the features as well. Like, is there any kind of view on the property, right?
Yeah.
Views can command significant premiums. If you're coastal, you might have ocean views. If you're in the mountains, you might have a nice valley view. So, views are very, very desirable, and sometimes they're rare. So if your property has a view or if a comp has a view, you need to factor that into the value. And, additionally, if it has access to freeways, if it's has easy access to groceries, to schools. So if it's very, centrally located to other amenities in the neighborhood and just things that are going to improve the buyer's lifestyle when they live at that property. These are things that you're, ultimately, if you're fixing and flipping, that buyer is going to be looking at. And those are things that you're going to be marketing on the resale as reasons why someone should buy your house versus somebody else's house that's on the market at the same time.
Yeah. I just had a flashback to a property one time someone sent me, and there was 3 freeways, and there was one property in the middle of these 3 freeways, and there was no comparable properties. And just imagine having this property of all these freeways going around it. It was absolutely ridiculous. And so you have to keep that in consideration. That property was so unique. Didn't spend a second analyzing because I was like, number one, the people that want to live here, there's probably not a lot of them. And then number 2, I'm not going to be able to find any comps. It's way too unique. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, there's a difference between being close to freeway access and then literally right next to a freeway.
Yeah.
So I think, it's convenience versus, inconvenience and a nuisance, right?
Yeah.
So knowing the difference and knowing, how far away do you need to be from that freeway in order for it to be a plus and not a negative.
Yep. And then there's, HOAs. You already mentioned those, right? Homeowner associations. We see it in condos all the time where we're located, $1,000 a month HOA fees. That is significant. That is very significant. Sometimes 1/5, 1/4 of a mortgage out here for an HOA fee for a condominium or townhome or, even single family houses in some situations. So that's important to consider, especially right when we're comping property. You may be your subject property may be in an HOA community versus one that's not. It can be very, very different. There could be a lot of amenities that come up with that HOA. And this rolls into now like the communities, because you could be looking at a property that's in a gated community versus another property that's not in a gated community. And that can drastically affect the values. And you got to be careful for this because the property could still be in the same city, the same zip code, but right over here across the street was a gated community where the houses sell for $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 higher, right? Because there's no crime in there. People feel safe. 15 mile per hour speed limits. The kids can run around in there versus outside. There might be crime and things along those lines. And quick little story. One time I was helping out an individual. He wanted me to help him comp a property way back in the day. It was at an open house for one of my fix and flips. And he had this deal. He had this property. And the agent was telling him, hey, man, this is going to sell at $1.2 million all day. The agent was telling him that, a buyer's agent. And when I looked at the property for him, and this individual was going to pursue this property and take it down as his first fix and flip. And when I looked at the property, his subject property was outside this gated community. It was near San Diego State University, actually. The gated community right over there?
Oh, yeah, Alvarado Estates.
Yep. And his property was outside the gated community. The real estate agent was using comps all inside the gated community. It was a several $100,000 difference in ARV value. And the agent had no skin in the game. The agent wanted their buyer's commission, so they were saying, hey, buy this property all day, buy it all day. And, I sent him my full analysis, did the actual comps for him, told him that, hey, this is in El Dorado Estates. It's in the gated community. All these comps are there. Yours is not. And so that story is there to tell you that individual would have taken down that fix and flip. We did the math, right? We used the deal calculator. He would have lost a significant amount of money. And he was a young 20-something-year-old.
Would have ended his career.
Yeah. One bad deal. Yeah, one setback. You got $200,000 that you have to pay back. It's like, great. You got the bill. You got student loans of a doctor, and you're 21 years old, and you're not a doctor. Not a good situation to be in.
Yeah. Well, good thing he brought you the deal and, had you check the comps.
Yeah.
Because, like to your point, if you go from one community to the next, one can have a clubhouse and a pool and security 24/7. The other one might not have any of those. And it might have access to, different school districts from one to the other, as well as, sometimes with HOAs, they have different fee structures, they have different reserves. So really the health of the HOA as an organization gets overlooked all the time by buyers.
Yeah.
And so it's a little bit in the weeds for most wholesalers, but if you're really looking to buy and flip in HOAs, then sometimes they have restrictions on the renovations you can do and the color paint you can put up. And sometimes they need to approve like every little detail of your project. So if you have to really understand what you're getting into, what the community is all about, if there's any, difficult politics happening within the organization, if there's any big assessments that are coming due, right? Those are just big fees that the owners are forced to pay the HOAs, sometimes tens of thousands of dollars, because they need to improve the sidewalks or they need to renovate the pool or the clubhouse. The owners are paying for that, right? And so you have to understand the health of the HOA and then understanding if there's assessments coming up. So that's why it's important to use comps in the same community, because if a property's sold under those same conditions, then it's so much more comparable to another property in that same subdivision, that same gated community.
Totally. And so we talked a lot about the characteristics of the house, some about the area as well. And that's just something else I want to touch on, the characteristics of the area as well to keep in mind, right? That proximity to airports, right? For example, we live very close to airports, 15 minutes away from an airport. I don't hear any planes though, right? I'm not under the flight path. And so taking this into consideration, is the house you're analyzing, is it under a flight path? And does it have noise pollution? Because that can be freaking annoying for a lot of buyers. That can hurt the resale value of your property. Versus proximity can still be positive to an airport. 15 minutes away, it's a breeze. I don't even need to hop on the freeway to get to the airport. Yet I don't have noise pollution. I love it. And so those characteristics are very important. Like you were talking about the freeways, right? You could be very close to your freeway. You see the freeway, doesn't look that great. Looks like a concrete, road in a way, because it is. Mm-hmm. And then, but you could be close enough to where you have easy freeway access, right? For example, over here, if you're in La Jolla, you're in the heart of La Jolla, it freaking stinks to get to the freeway. It's all backed up. Whereas if you live on maybe close to Ingram Street, right, you can hop right onto the freeway. And so those pros and cons of where this property is located, these are other characteristics that really have nothing to do with the square footage of the property, but the proximity to in the particular area that it's in.
Definitely, yeah. You always got to think of what's the end goal with the property.
Yeah.
Whether you're going to be buying and holding it as a rental, right? You're going to need to rent it to tenants. Yeah. And so, what are the tenants looking for? Right? Why do they want to live in your property? What about that location is going to make them want to pay a premium, right, over other properties? Just because your property looks nice doesn't mean you can get top dollar for it, right? It's all about the location. It's all about the lifestyle. And same with the resale. If you're buying and fixing and selling, you need to understand, why are people going to want to buy your property? Why are they going to want to live there? And so really, understanding the location really well is going to allow you to buy it with confidence, put it under contract with confidence, knowing that there are going to be buyers for that particular piece of real estate. So the other thing that's super important, I mentioned earlier, the schools.
Yeah.
Right? A lot of individuals and families are making their home purchase decisions based on school district.
Yep.
So if you're in an award-winning, highly ranked school district, for elementary, middle, high school, then your property values are probably going to go up over time. And even for a fix and flip resale, you're going to have a lot of buyers who are interested in buying it just for that fact alone. So that's a big factor as far as knowing that you're going to have an asset that you can sell quickly and that you're going to have buyers lining up to acquire it. And on the flip side, if there's schools that are poorly rated, then there has to be other reasons why people would buy it. They're probably not going to buy it to put their kids in school to these very poorly ranked schools. So there has to be other reasons and other features and amenities that are within the proximity to make it a convenient access to all these different things for that buyer or renter. So super important, knowing your area, knowing the location. These are things beyond just the quality of rehab that is going into the property, which will impact the value and ultimately the success of a project. So with that, it comes down to the like noise level as well. If you're close to a freeway, if you're close to a new apartment building that's getting constructed, those are things that can impact your resale value as well. So you're going to want to make sure that you're not negatively impacted by those things as well. And additionally, I always love to do a street view of any property that I'm looking at, determining the ARV on, or any comps that I'm looking to pull. I'll do a street view because you want to make sure that it truly is in a comparable street. It's in a comparable neighborhood. There aren't any electrical poles running through your property or in front of your property. And if there are, you have to take that into consideration, right? It's not a deal killer, but you just need to take note of these things so that you can accurately factor that into your valuation on any given property.
Yeah. Man, I think we could probably go hours and hours talking about all the different characteristics. I think the point here for anyone listening is, when Ryan and I comp properties now at this level, we've been doing it for so long, we take all of these characteristics, all of these factors into consideration. And at first, it wasn't like that when we started. We didn't know about these. I didn't know about understanding about is my property in a flight path until I put a property under contract under a flight path. A lot of this, of what we're talking about here, came from making the mistakes of putting a house under contract on a 55 mile per hour road and knowing that no one wants to buy it because they want to live in a cul-de-sac and want their kids to want a house that's on a 15-mile-per-hour road. So the point here is being aware of all these different characteristics, taking all these into consideration. And it can feel like a lot for sure at first. It might be like, oh my gosh, but it becomes fun. I think once you start to understand all these characteristics, once you start having the end in mind, right? And especially if you want to wholesale real estate, the more you can think about like the fix and flipper and do what's best for them. Is this going to be a property that the fix and flipper can actually resale and make a profit on? Is it going to be a desirable property that Jack and Sally, who have 2 children, are they going to want to buy this property and have their kids live there and raise their family there? Because a lot of first-time home buyers have children or are thinking about growing into a home with their children.
Yep.
And I think specifically for a lot of people who want to get into wholesaling, they're not thinking that far ahead. They're not thinking, is this property going to be desirable for a first-time home buyer once it's renovated? A lot of amateur wholesalers when they're starting out, they're thinking, can I squeeze $10,000 out of this deal? And that's it. But that's not going to make you a great wholesaler. That's not going to make you great at wholesaling, nor is that going to make you great at fixing and flipping property. Right? The way we look at wholesaling, getting good at comps, is I look at wholesaling as the breeding grounds to becoming a phenomenal fix and flipper. It's the best training ground there is for that. And so, I don't think that people are inherently greedy or just think about that $10,000 wholesale check. I think it's just a lack of awareness. It's a lack of understanding. Just like when we started, we weren't aware of all these different characteristics. I wasn't aware about the differences in HOAs. I wasn't aware, that one street over could be that different zip code in a different school district, and that affects the ARV by $50,000. I wasn't aware until I put these properties under contract and tried to wholesale them. And so I just wanted to breathe that color in this conversation that there are a lot of characteristics. The more you do it, the better understanding you'll get, and part of it's just practice and just being aware.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it took a long time for me to quickly look at properties and determine an ARV within 5 minutes, within a matter of just quickly scanning and looking and knowing an area. But experience is the best teacher, and you don't just automatically learn. You can't just push a button and all of a sudden you have an ARV, or all of a sudden you just download all this knowledge into your brain. It just takes experience, and it does take just putting in the time and looking at a lot of properties and getting to know your market. And we've done our best to accelerate that learning for anyone who's interested. When you have resources like our comp criteria cheat sheet, that actually distills down all of this information, all of these factors we're talking about, and really gets to the heart of what an appraisal is all about.
Yeah.
Right. Really understanding each comp. And we even pick and pull, like, what are the most important things that you need to pull from each comp you're looking at, and write them down. And then how do you take all of that information and then come up with a realistic ARV that your cash buyer is going to feel confident about, or if you're buying and flipping yourself, that you can feel confident about because your money is on the line. So that's why, our resource is just invaluable, because it can save people a lot of time, it can save people a lot of headache, and just really the frustration of looking at all the data and not knowing what to do with it. So that's why there's a framework here, and it's, I always like to look at appraisers just like what we do here as real estate investors.
Yeah.
And so what our cheat sheet is all about, and the additional resource that you get, is how do you use comps to determine the ARV. Is really, we've taken an appraisal and distilled it down into the most easy to follow and step-by-step framework to actually do your own appraisal. Because as investors, that's what we're doing with these properties. It's actually conducting our own appraisals on pieces of real estate. So, I mean, we've looked at hundreds of appraisals. I geek out about this stuff because, thinking like an appraiser is one of the most important concepts to really own in this business. And so, why is an appraisal important, right? Why do I always say think like an appraiser? It's because whether you're wholesaling or fixing and flipping, you have to realize that when you buy, fix, and resell a piece of real estate, who's going to be buying that property? It's probably going to be a retail buyer who's going to be financing the purchase with a conventional loan, maybe an FHA loan, a VA loan. And guess what? When they get that loan is contingent on them getting an appraisal. And so that lender is only going to give them the money to buy the house if that property appraises for at least the value that they're agreeing to purchase it from you as the flipper. So if that property does not appraise for the price that that purchaser is willing to pay for it, then that could ruin the deal.
Yeah.
Then that purchaser can now cancel the agreement, or they can ask for a price reduction. Mm-hmm. So as a fix and flip investor, and even as a wholesaler, you need to really think like an appraiser. And that's ultimately the ARV that we're trying to determine, is what can this property realistically sell for if we rehabbed it and resold it tomorrow? Because what we do here in our cheat sheet is the same thing that an appraiser is going to do. They're going to pull 3 to 5 comps. They're going to look at all the characteristics that we just covered and probably even more things as well. And they're going to make a determination. They're going to form an opinion, based on the comps, the real estate comps, as to what this property is worth at the time, right? It's a snapshot of time, and it's opinion at one point in time. And if our property doesn't appraise, then that could really sink the deal. And no matter what that buyer's willing to pay, if they're financing it, then it really hinges on that appraisal.
Mm-hmm. And that's another big understanding for anyone who wants to get into fixing and flipping and wholesaling. The ARV in a way is determined by appraisers. And so you have to think like an appraiser. It's why we comp property the way we comp property. We're thinking like appraisers because they're going to dictate the value of the resale value of the property once it's renovated and with their opinion. And so the more we can think like an appraiser, the closer we can get to the appraiser's value of the property. And I think a lot of people out there are like, oh, let me just comp a property, and don't know why the heck they're comping a property, don't know why they should follow our rules, don't know, what's the point? The point is so we can comp a property like an appraiser and get the truest value as close as possible. Sometimes we're right on the money. It's great. Sometimes we're within, 5, 10, 15,000. The goal is to be as close as possible. And that, we develop that over time. And when we think like an appraiser, the approach they use, it's called the sales comparison approach. They use those comparables, just like you said. They're using 3 to 5 comps. They're using comps not from 3 years ago, within roughly the last 6 months.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
And the rules we have in our comp criteria cheat sheet follow those rules, so we can comp property as close to them. Now, additionally, what appraisers do too is they make adjustments, those little adjustments, because they know they're never going to find, not all the time are they going to find properties that are absolutely completely similar, but there may be a comp with a pool on it versus the subject property doesn't have a pool, but everything is very similar. So they might make an adjustment and say, you know what, this house with the pool sold for $525, and we're going to minus $25,000, and say that now with the appraisal, our subject property is probably going to sell at $500,000. So they're making those adjustments, that part art, part science, and that's going on the appraisal. And if anyone has looked at an appraisal, you actually see those adjustments in there. It's pretty fascinating. I think anyone should get their hands on an appraisal so they can take a look at it. I think that one's probably 26 pages or so. But the most important part is that sales comparison approach when it's laid out on there.
Absolutely. Yeah, I always recommend anyone get their hands on an appraisal. This is one from a refinance I did earlier this year, but it does the exact same thing, that we always recommend with our training, with our framework. The appraiser is pulling 3 to 5 comparable sales that have been sold as recently as possible. So they try to go as recently to today as possible. The further back they go, the more they will discount that comp, the less weight they'll actually put on the comp. So yeah, to your point, Alex, they'll actually look at the gross sales price of the comp and then make adjustments based on different features that make our property superior or inferior. So they'll look at things like the conditions of the sale. Like, was it a short sale? Was it a foreclosure? Was it a traditional arm's length sale? Was there anything that particularly made it more motivational from the seller? Do they have a bigger lot, right? What's the site size? Do they have any kind of views on the property? The age of the property, the condition of the property, as well as the total room count, right? The bed and bath count. If one property has more bathrooms or more bedrooms, then it's going to be worth more. And then we'll have to subtract from that value to then come to our value as well. There's things like, like you even mentioned earlier, the garage parking situation. Does it have any, outdoor patio? Is there a deck, right? Is there a basement with finished square footage? So there's a whole list of items here on this appraisal, and we've included those in our cheat sheet right here just to make it easier because, this is a pretty lengthy report. I didn't even print the whole thing here. This was only half of it, and it's a pretty thick packet. So there's obviously a lot of factors, but we've really distilled it down to a framework that really everybody here can follow and do what an appraiser would do to determine the value of a property, make our own adjustments, because that is really what the sales comparison approach is all about. And that is the most widely used, the most commonly used appraisal method for residential real estate, right? For one unit, detached single families, for condos, really just the traditional residential real estate sale. Like, that is how they come up with the value. And that's exactly what we'll do when we're finding ARVs, when we're looking at our own acquisitions. So that's why we like to think like an appraiser.
Yeah. All those characteristics you talked about, we just talked about in the beginning of this video too. So they're all in there. Exactly. So we've looked at a lot of these. And again, like for flippers, it's one of the most important moments in a fix and flip is when you get that appraisal back. Because when you think about it, when you're a wholesaler, you're analyzing a deal, probably not going to buy the property, but you're analyzing it on behalf of the project that's about to happen. And fast forward 6 months, someone bought the property, they spent $50,000, $60,000, $100,000 renovating it, and they listed it, and then now they have a buyer in place. Okay, well, you might have a buyer in place for your ARV, but what if it doesn't appraise as much, right? So you can contest an appraisal, right? Mm-hmm. If you don't get your property appraising, you can always contest it. You can get it reappraised. But that moment is so important because then now it's validating your assumptions. It's validating your estimate. It's validating your opinion of value. Mm-hmm. And that is just such a great opportunity to hone your skills and just see how on point you were, how accurate you were with your initial projections. Yeah. And a quick tip, if you want to fix and flip a property, show up to the appraisal. Show up to the appraisal. I like to always show up to the appraisals. We like to show up there when we have a fix and flip property. I print out comps. I have discussions with the appraiser. I'm trying to make friends with them. I'm trying to get that thing to appraise and just learn as well every single time. But quick little tip.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad you mentioned that, Alex, because this appraisal I'm holding here was a big moment for me. So just, I think, less than 6 months before, this property appraised for $950,000, significantly lower than what we had bought it for. And then I had it reappraised 6 months later, and it appraised for $1.35 million without any improvements or anything. So the point here is that I showed up to that second appraisal, and I met the appraiser. I shook hands with him. I came prepared with comps that would justify a higher value. I came up with the leases that showed the rent on it. I came up with the site plan. I had a full packet of information to give to the appraiser, and I talked him up about the area and how amazing this area is, how booming it is, how tight the inventory is. And so guess what? That appraisal came in, over $400,000 higher. So that's awesome. To your point, it's super important when you have a lot of money on the line and, when you're looking to get a high appraisal, showing up and being prepared can make a huge difference.
Yeah, in your case, over $400,000.
Totally. And it's to the point that we made earlier that it's an opinion of value, and you might have two different appraisals on the same property, and they can be wildly different in value. So again, guys, I know it's easy to fall in the trap of analysis paralysis. You're spending 3 hours comping one property, But just keep in mind that there's no perfect answer. There's no one ARV. Going back to the original point, that there is an art to the science here, and so don't spend hours and hours on one property. Just learn from it, get the facts, follow our framework, and you'll be able to confidently justify any after repair values that you're putting in front of your cash buyers or that you're looking to present to anyone else involved in your deal.
Absolutely. And let's dive into this in a second, our comp criteria. But first off, if someone wanted to use some tools, Ryan, to find real estate comps, what would you recommend for them?
Yeah, first and foremost, the best way to find real estate comps is using the multiple listing service, right? Mm-hmm. The MLS is a wealth of data. It's the number one database for listed properties, for sold properties, really for all real estate that's trading in your market by real estate agents, by brokers. So get access to the MLS, whether you have direct access, whether you're using a real estate broker or an agent. They can always run comps for you. That's one of their main responsibilities as real estate agents. We can also help you guys get MLS assistant access. You can run comps without a realtor, right? If you know where to look and if you get MLS assistant access. And then also you can talk to a title company. I like to talk to a title officer that I've worked with for many years. They have access to software. They have a database of really any property in your market, and they also have title records. They can show you the most recent comps as well. And then the easiest one that anyone can look at today is my favorite website, redfin.com. You can hop on, and they pull from the MLS. So you can generally get most of the information that is on the MLS on Redfin. It's about 95% of that information is on Redfin, Zillow, Realtor.com. You can also use some paid software such as PropStream, Privy as well is another one that's very popular. So regardless of what you use, you want to use these tools to pull the data, to find these addresses and really confirm that these properties have sold, and then make your own judgment as to how comparable is it to your subject property. I know especially new investors who don't have a lot of experience, they tend to err on the side of using these automated softwares that spit out an ARV. You plug in an address and then it tells you the after repair value of a property. Those things are wildly inaccurate. I would never recommend anyone use those software that you're ultimately betting on for your investment, for your offer. So we always want people in this business to think for themselves, to gather the data, get the data for themselves, and then use these frameworks to then determine your own ARV that you can really stand behind, that you have the data to justify why you're projecting this value in the future.
Yeah, great point. Because when an appraiser does the appraisal, they're not using some software you can get online for $97 to determine the ARV. Mm-hmm. They're going through all the characteristics like we talked about. And that's the important thing. And I think a lot of people using software like that, they're just not aware. And now anyone watching this is aware that they understand that isn't the way. That's a very risky way. That's the scary side of it. It's a very risky way to go about fixing and flipping and even wholesaling. You're not going to be able to speak to your cash buyer appropriately if you can't even determine the ARV, with confidence. And so, just wanted to share that because it's just not the right way. It's not the right way to do things. A random software doesn't dictate the ARV, the resale value. An appraiser does.
Exactly. And I see too many people, they look at the Zestimate as this is what my property is worth, right? The Zestimate says this, the Zestimate says that.
Yeah.
I've had multiple instances where one day the Zestimate said one number, and then we listed the property, and within a matter of 24 hours, the Zestimate went up by 20%. So it actually will take data from sales and the market, and then it can change significantly. So again, I never want people to think that the Zestimate or the Redfin estimate or any of these other software that just automate the value really equates to market value. You need to take it a few steps deeper. You need to study the real estate comps. You need to study the market activity. Look at the active inventory too. Are there a bunch of renovated properties just like yours that have been sitting on the market for 90 days, right? That's a red flag. That's a problem, right? You need to investigate, and maybe that's going to impact your value too. So we just need to take it a few steps deeper, and like that's why we're taking the time to go through in detail to share this information with everybody, so they're not stuck in the ways of thinking, oh, I'm just going to be lazy and use this automated valuation. That can get you in a lot of trouble, and we don't want anybody to lose money on a deal.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. It's a skill. It takes time to develop the skill. And, you already mentioned it too. In addition with those softwares, we love Google Maps. So looking at the street view and aerial view. Every time we're looking at a property to purchase that we're comping, we're using Google Maps. We're seeing is it up to date, right? When were these automated cars driving there and taking the photos of the property? Even if it's outdated a little bit, I still love using it to get a feel for the area. One thing, right, if we're doing a property locally that we're fixing and flipping, we're going to drive the comps. We're going to physically go and look at the comps. It's hard to do that when we're virtual wholesaling or virtually flipping. All right, we're not going to go fly over there 5 hours away and then go drive the comps to get a feel for the area. We're going to use Google Maps.
Yeah. I like to walk the neighborhood, in Google Street View, and just a few clicks of a button. I mean, thank you, Google.
Yeah,
you guys are awesome because you have. Yeah, we love Google. So you can literally just walk the street. You can look at the neighbors. You can look at the subject property. Sometimes you'll see some funny people making some faces at the Google camera, but it's a great way just to get to know the neighborhood, because curb appeal is so important when you're reselling a property.
Yep.
And the listing agent who's making the listing, they're probably not going to tell you if there's a bunch of negatives around the property. They're not going to say, oh, watch out for the neighbor who has a boarded up house. Watch out for all the cars parked in front of the yard.
Right.
Like, you can't miss our house. It's right next to that house. Like, they're not going to say that.
Yep.
So doing that is going to uncover some things that you might not see in that listing, right? You might not see in the comps. You got to drive the neighborhood, walk the neighborhood virtually, right, using the Google Street View. So we're just so gifted in today's day and age where we have access to these things that, think about it. 15 years ago, that didn't even exist. So we're living in a very special time to be real estate investors, where we have unlimited access at our fingertips.
Amen. So great. So now let's say, hey, we're using our local MLS. We got access to it, or we're using redfin.com to find our comps. Let's go into our real estate skills comp criteria now. The distilled version of the appraisal, and what we've been using for 12 years to comp properties effectively that we're wholesaling or fixing and flipping, to comp properties with confidence, to comp properties with certainty. And once again, if you haven't downloaded this, you can grab it at realestateskills.com/comp. We'll put the link in the description too. But this is something, man, I wish when I started, I had this. So how about we dive into this and cover the real estate skills comp criteria?
Absolutely. Yeah. So we'll always use this whenever we're acquiring a piece of real estate for wholesale, for fix and flip. We want to make sure that any comps that we're pulling do fall within this criteria. So what we have in this cheat sheet, as we mentioned, you want to make sure you have the right type of property, right? Again, we see too many people come to us with a deal that is a mobile home and they're using condos nearby and a new luxury tower as comps. That's not going to represent your property well at all, because it's a different type of property, different valuation, different financing available. So you need to make sure it's the same type of property, end of story. You really can't use comps that aren't the same property.
Yep.
And there's really no way around it.
Yeah. Detached single-family houses to detached single-family houses.
Exactly. So, condos to condos, townhouses to townhouses, mobile homes to mobile homes. And further, just because we have the right type of property, we also want to make sure that we're using sold comps.
Yes.
Right? We see it too often where, new wholesalers come and they say, oh, well, my property can get $500,000 because there's one active comp on the market that is listed for $500,000.
Yeah.
But then you look at the sold properties and nothing sold for over $350,000.
Yeah.
So you can't just say that, oh, because there's no inventory and because there's a couple of active comps that haven't sold yet, that now our property can now get that much.
Mm-hmm.
It just doesn't work like that, right? The reason we use sold comps and sold properties as comps is because that is an indication of where a willing buyer and a willing seller were able to meet minds and actually create a transaction in the free market. You know, that's the only way you can really determine where something's going to be able to sell, because someone already just sold a property in that market. So it's real market data. It's not fake data. It's when you're pulling these comps, it's real information that you can use to make investment decisions. So sold properties are really what we want to use to derive value from. There is a place for pending properties, right? If it's pending, especially if it is pending very quickly, then we can reasonably assume that it's going to sell close to that asking price if it went pending very quickly.
Yeah.
But again, if we're going to use a pending comp for our analysis, it's best to call the real estate agent.
Yep.
It's best to call somebody who's close to that transaction. So at least you can get an idea of, hey, did they have multiple offers and they went pending over ask? What's the situation there? Because we can't just blindly assume that it's going to close for list price. So, but it is good to look at that information because, again, we're gathering data. We're gathering this information about our market. And the same goes with listed properties, right? We can't be blind and not look at the competition, because if there's a flood of inventory and none of it's selling, then that's a problem, right? That's going to, your cash buyer, your end buyer is going to be looking at that too. And they're going to say, hey, whoa, there's too many properties listed and they're not selling. So what makes me think that I'm going to be able to sell the exact same product in this market for the same price without any issues? So that's also a factor, but again, focus on those sold properties. And when we're determining the after repair value, we have to find properties that have been repaired, right? We can't just use comps that are lived in that, you can tell from the listing photos, there's just clothes all over the floor and there's a bunch of, food all over the counters. We want to look for those properties, ideally that were just flipped. Those are my favorite comps because that can tell you where did somebody buy the property and then where did somebody sell the property. And it's also a freshly renovated house or a piece of real estate. And people will pay a premium for a freshly renovated property because no one's lived in that house after the renovation. Like it's fresh, brand new flooring, fresh counters, fresh paint. It doesn't have the feel of someone else living there. So people are going to pay a premium for that. It's more than likely going to be more modern finishes, those colors that people in that market are more attracted to. And so that can ultimately be the basis of figuring out what the renovation costs are as well. So that's going to tell us what's the ceiling of value in that neighborhood. What's the ceiling of value for a given property in that market, because that's ultimately what the property is going to turn into after repair. It's going to be renovated. It's going to be top notch most likely. So we want to compare it to those renovated properties. And again, if there aren't flips, you just want to find the nicest properties that kind of fit that mold of the subject property, and then make your best assumption. We don't want to assume that our property is going to sell for more just because we think it's going to be nicer. We need to really just look at what is the data there and make our best conservative guess that we can sell for that same value and not a whole lot more.
So best possible condition, ideally fully renovated, right? If you're analyzing your property, you're looking for real estate comps, don't find that distressed house with the clothes on the floor with boarded up windows. It's not going to help you to determine the ARV. So now the sales date. I mean, this is important too, right? We're looking for comps that have sold within the last 6 months, and the sooner the better, right? The closer they've sold to where the date is today, the better. And right, we see people all the time pulling comps from 12 months ago or 24 months ago. If there's enough comps, appraisers aren't going to be looking at those comps, and prices could have gone up or it could have gone down. It's a little too far into the past to determine the effective future value of this property. So we want to be looking within the last 6 months of the property. And sometimes there's enough comps we can look within the last few months too. I'm always trying to find comps as close as I can to today's date to dictate that future value.
Absolutely. And if you take a fix and flipper's perspective, again, wholesalers, you want to think like your end buyer. You want to look at deals like your end buyer. So if, let's say we're using a comp that sold 6 months ago, if we bought this property today, rehabbed it, and put it back on the market in 4 months, that 6-month-old comp is now 10 months old by the time we resell that property. And we're not going to be able to use that comp when we resell it. So the more recent the comp, the more likely we'll be able to use it when we actually bring it back to market and then resell that same house. So the further back you go in time, the less relevant it's going to be to today's valuation, because the markets change, interest rates fluctuate, inventory can change as new developments hit the market. So the closer you are to today's snapshot of value, the better off you're going to be, and the more compelling that comp is going to be relative to the subject property. So couldn't agree with you more. 3 months is ideal. 6 months is kind of like that threshold.
Yeah.
But again, we'll get into it a little bit later, but there are instances where you can go further back in time if there's not a lot of comparable sales in that market, for example.
And then for looking for comps, right? We're looking a mile away, 2 miles away. What we like to do is look within a 0.5 mile radius of the subject property. A lot of times on the MLS when we use it, we have a great tool. You just go 0.5 miles out, creates a circle for us. Or you can use the tool on Redfin as well, do the same exact thing. This typically ensures that we're not going too far out, right? It's what these are tools and rules to effectively quickly find comparables, right? So that we can find comparables to dictate the ARV. And then we want to find and make sure, this goes in the next step, that the comparables are within the same city and zip code as well. Extremely vital, extremely important. And as much as we can, if we want to go one level deeper in the same neighborhood. But, all the time, right, we analyze properties and people are bringing us comps, and, the comps are in different zip codes as opposed to our subject property. And I just never comp from different zip codes, different cities, because that's when we go into different school districts, right? That's when we go into sometimes different laws or regulations in that particular area. There's just a lot of differences that go on. And appraisers aren't looking at different zip codes to pull comps. Appraisers aren't looking in different cities to find comps. They're looking at the same exact city and zip code as the subject property, most importantly.
Absolutely, yeah. Same neighborhood, same subdivision. Really, they're just looking for the most comparable location, and they just want to make sure that whatever value that we're bringing to the table is truly comparable. Again, that all ties into the features, the amenities, the school districts, the proximity to desirable parts of the city. Like all of those factors really tie into that radius of a half a mile. So, there are instances, again, where you can go a little bit further if you're in a very rural area where there just aren't houses as densely populated as other areas. So particularly in more like dense, just traditional cities that have a decent sized population, half a mile radius is a really great rule of thumb to utilize. But then also just making sure that your comps aren't crossing any major roads or highways or train tracks, because in some areas things can change block by block. Some cities are notorious for just changing very quickly, even within a small radius. So again, that's where it comes to walking the neighborhood on the street view and really just kind of paying attention to how does the neighborhood look on that Google map? Like, does it look significantly different? Are the shapes of the lot changing? Does it look pretty uniform? So as you begin to look at these neighborhoods from an aerial view, you can kind of get a feel for, hey, is this really the same type of neighborhood? Certainly the zip code is one of the first things I look at when people bring us a set of comps. And if the zip codes are off, I'll just say, hey, well, you just got to check that comp and make sure that it's comparable. Like, there are instances where you might be on the dividing line of one zip code to the next. Sometimes it doesn't make a difference, but more than likely it does, because like you said, The rules can change from one city to the next. The school districts might change as well. And sometimes people desire a certain address. Like sometimes people want to have an address of a certain city, like La Jolla versus San Diego, right? There's a big difference. And so just one example of how just having that address can make a big difference.
Great points. And then we got the size of the comparables. So the actual livable square footage of the property, right? Our what we use is plus or minus 20% of the square footage of our subject property.
Yep. So again, like we said before, you want that footprint to be as similar as possible. The size of the property is one of the most important factors in valuing a piece of real estate, besides the location, because that is ultimately what buyers are looking for as far as the size of the house. That's one of the main criteria people are looking at. So just make sure your comps that you're pulling when you're determining the ARV are within, plus or minus 20% of that subject property, and you should be in good shape.
Yeah, and it's as simple as doing the calculation, 20% of the square footage, and then, if you use the MLS, you can plug that in, the low side, the high side, boom, and now you're pulling up comps within that half-mile radius, plus or minus 20% of the square footage.
Absolutely.
And what about that bed-bathroom count we got in here?
Yeah, for sure. You can't take a 3-1 and expect it to sell for the same amount as a 4-2, right?
Nope.
So that matters a lot, especially the bathroom count as well. So you ideally want to have the same bed-bath count, and there are adjustments that you can make if you go, if you stray away from that, right? You can add value for a bedroom or take away from a bathroom. So I just look for the comps that have the same bed-bath count, ideally, and then if you need to stray away, then you'll have to make some adjustments to give or take value depending on what your property is, what your configuration is on your particular property.
Boom. And so this is the real estate skills comp criteria, what you want to use on every single property. And now let's answer a question from the YouTube community, because this is a very relevant question that we've probably seen over 1,000 times. And it goes into the second part of the comp criteria cheat sheet too. So how about I ask you this question, Ryan? So this is from Leo from YouTube, just came in today. Hey, quick question about comps. If there aren't many comps around the property that I'm looking at, could I possibly use a renovated house that is currently on the market to sell as a comp? Something with similar square footage, beds and baths that hasn't been sold yet. Maybe I could use that price that they're trying to sell it for as a comp. Just making sure.
Yeah, great question, Leo. I'm glad you're asking us because you can make a fatal mistake.
Yep.
You definitely can't use that until it sells. So if it's just active on the market, I don't know how long it's been sitting there. It might have been sitting there for 90 days. It might be fresh on the market, but regardless, keep an eye on that comp. And until it goes pending, until it actually sells, we don't know what price a buyer is willing to buy that piece of real estate for. So you can definitely keep your eye on it, but we can't take that value to the bank, right? Because that transaction hasn't closed yet. They don't even have a buyer for it yet. So the answer is no. Unfortunately, we cannot use an active property as a comp for a deal that we're looking to do ourselves. So what do you do if you can't find comps for a property? Then I would encourage you, Leo, to first of all, just dig deeper, see if there's any other resources that you haven't looked at. Are you just looking at Redfin? Are you just looking at Zillow? Why don't you try the other sites as well? Because I found comps on one website, like I found comps on realtor.com that I couldn't find on Zillow before. So I always look at every single site that we've mentioned in this training, every single site that we have in our comp criteria, and do a thorough search because there might be comps that you haven't found yet. Also look at the public records too. So there's different sources of the public records, right? Use PropStream, go on your county assessor website, utilize Privy. So use all the available resources that you have to dig for that data. And sometimes you won't be able to find anything. So if you do, awesome. Hopefully you found something that can give you a stronger foundation of your value. But if you don't find that, then you might need to loosen up that criteria a bit until you do find a relevant enough comp. So I would first look a little bit outside of that 0.5 mile radius. And as long as the neighborhood is comparable, then you can use a comp that's maybe a mile away. So you just, again, need to make sure everything else checks out for that house, the curb appeal, the street, the proximity to amenities, the characteristic of the neighborhood. If all that checks out, then yes, you can use a comp that's a little bit further out. You can also go back in time too. So we said, go back in time 3 to 6 months. Why don't you try going back 9 months or a year and see if there's any more comps then? I've gone back as much as 2 years to find a comp in an area that just didn't have any comparable sales. There's very low volume of transactions happening, so you just have to go back even further. But keep in mind, the further you go back, the more you have to discount that comp, and you might need to factor in a discount to your subject property just because things fluctuate. Again, the market gets hot, the market can cool off. So get familiar with where your market is in particular and how it's changed since, a year ago, right? Since 2 years ago. Have prices gone up? Have prices gone down? And where are you at in the market cycle? And that can be a basis of how much you discount that comp from a year ago, from 2 years ago. So you can certainly do that. You can also use comps that might have an additional bedroom, an additional bathroom, and vice versa. You might go down a little bit. So just loosen up that criteria, maybe loosen up the size of the property as well. So there has to be something that's sold in the area, right? So if nothing's sold in the area at all, and you continue to loosen up your criteria, then I just question whether that's a deal worth pursuing. If there's no sales, if there's no properties trading, then that's kind of a yellow flag to me that there's either not a lot of investment happening there's not a lot of activity. How are you going to find a cash buyer for a deal when there's no properties trading? So your cash buyers are going to be looking at the comps too, and if there's no comps, then they're not going to want to buy the deal. So again, loosen it up, and if you can't find those comps, there's probably some way to find value, but you have to have sold properties to compare it to. So again, if there's no comps whatsoever, I would just pass on the deal. There's not going to be a whole lot that you can do if there's zero comps at all. But if you do loosen your criteria, eventually you should be able to find something. Right? You should find something that has sold. So when you do find comps that have sold, other properties that have sold, maybe they're not the best comps, then you can still derive data from those comps, right? You can look at the price per square foot. You can look at the overall price, look at how long it sat on the market until it finally sold. Did they have to reduce their price a bunch of times? Or maybe it sold quickly. Who knows? So you have to just derive data from that comp. And then from there, you can come up with a very reasonable assumption as to where this property should sell if it was fixed up. So again, it's a lot easier when we're looking at a piece of real estate and an example. But there's always a way to derive some sort of value if we have any kind of sales data. So I always like to just look at the market in an area, look at the zip code, look at what are the values of any sales that are happening, what are the price per square foot, what's the average price per square foot for a zip code, right? So that should tell you something. And how similar is your property to those properties. And so you can maybe take on the low end, what's the lowest price per square foot that is sold in the area, and multiply it by your square footage, and that should give you very conservative value as to what that property is worth. And then you can apply the same for the average price per square foot for the area as well as the highest. And you can kind of get like the whole range of what it can sell for. So yeah, it just takes digging, and it takes making rational, logical decisions based on the data that you have available.
Yeah, that's a phenomenal answer to Leo's question. And Leo, if you follow these steps, these are the steps that we follow to be comping every single property. First, use the comp criteria that we have here. First, use that and the strict rules that we have. That doesn't, you aren't able to find comps, loosen up the bed bath count. Expand a little bit the reach, that 0.5 mile radius, 0.75. Follow this criteria that we've also put into the cheat sheet on what to do when you don't find comps. Because every deal is going to be a little bit different. And sometimes we might have to expand that reach. And I think most importantly, just so everyone watching is aware, what you said at the end is if we can't find any comps after doing that, it is yellow flag, borderline red flag, or it is a red flag, because I've seen so many, people, students just trying to, or just spending hours and hours and hours on properties that they can't find comps on and trying to make it work, or then pursuing that deal and putting it under contract when there aren't any comps. And it's extremely important if you're going to be wholesaling a house to a fix and flipper and they're sophisticated and worth their salts. A fix and flipper, if they can't determine the ARV because there are no comps, they're not going to fix and flip that house. They're not going to feel confident in flipping it. And so we've seen time and time again, people pursue these properties that have no comps. They don't know the ARV. They're just putting it under contract to put it under contract with no confidence, no certainty in the ARV, wasting dozens or hundreds of hours in the process. And I'll raise my hand and say, hey, I've been there. Like, I've done that. Like, that's why we're talking about it. So a lot of people don't spend their time doing this, because a lot of people that spend their time on deals that have no comps, they're trying to make it work. They're romanticizing it. They're like, oh, maybe just imaginary comp will pop up tomorrow, or like, can I just use all the active properties are for sale? Can I speculate on the sale? And you're going to be wasting a lot of time doing that, a whole lot of time. And at that point, if you expand the criteria and you can't find any comps, what I always say is just move on. There's another property out there. There's another deal right around the corner that has comps that you can probably comp in 5 to 15 minutes that you can then submit an offer on and feel confident to take down as a wholesale deal or fix and flip. There's always other deals out there. And I think a lot of people, when they're starting out, myself included, get too stuck on one deal they find, one property they find. They're just trying to make it work. And that's not how it works, right? It's like putting a brick into a round hole, right? So you're just forcing it to work. And really the best course of action at that point is just move on, go to the next property, go the path of least resistance at that point. You're like just trying to force it,
Yeah, just because you feel like it's a good deal, just because it looks like a good deal, just because it smells like a good deal, doesn't mean it's a good deal.
Yeah.
You need to have the facts, you need to have the numbers, you need to have the real estate comps. Otherwise, it's probably not a good deal. Mm-hmm. So there's plenty of fixers out there, right? There's plenty of distressed properties out there for sale that you can certainly buy. But if you don't have a solid plan, and part of that plan for any investor is understanding valuation, understanding real estate comps, because that's ultimately how you extract value in a marketplace. It's how you understand your purchase price that's going to make it profitable. Otherwise you're just buying a deal for fun, right? And it's more fun when you're making money. So it's hard to have profits. It's hard to have success if you don't understand the comps, because you can make bad investment decisions if you're just chasing properties that you just think are good, or you have a feeling they're good just because they look like they need love, right? There's plenty of properties that need to get renovated, but if you don't understand what the ARV can be, right, what the value is after you repair it, how much it costs to get there, and then ultimately what purchase price will make sense for you as an investor or you as a wholesaler, then you can just be spending and wasting time on properties that just don't have any potential. And there's, like Alex said, there's plenty of deals out there. There's always another deal around the corner. Mm-hmm. So just move on, take it as a learning experience, and focus on something that has a lot more potential.
Yeah, and in our experience from doing this for 12 years, wholesaling and flipping property and buying rental properties, one of our favorite strategies is pursuing deals on the MLS, on the market, with real estate agents. And what I always say is you're never going to run to a shortage of leads. It's about what leads you spend your time on. And when you're spending your time on these deals or these properties that have no comps, you're not effectively allocating your time and you're wasting your time. So it's about effective time allocation, focusing on the deals that are actually sellable, that you actually can fix and flip, you actually can wholesale. And I think that's one of the most important and overlooked skill sets when wholesaling and fixing and flipping on market properties. And we like to say too, sometimes the best deal you ever do is the one you don't do. Mm-hmm. Sometimes the best deal you pursue is the one you don't pursue, because we can always make more money. You and I, we know how to make money. You can't make more time. So you have to effectively allocate your time and know when to call it quits on a particular deal and move on, go to the next one. And I think anyone who masters that skill, the effective time allocation, the ROI they're going to be getting on their time is going to be so much higher.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's time well spent looking at lots of properties, running comps, doing examples. But at the end of the day, you want to develop that muscle, right? Develop that eye for knowing which properties are good to pursue, which ones you just got to move on to the next one. You know, we help students every day build that muscle and ultimately learn how to spend their time most effectively, right? Because it's not a leads problem, it's a focus problem, and it's knowing how to work the right leads and pursue the right leads to ultimately increase your opportunities and your success in this business. So,
absolutely right. And let's hit some best practices for comping for the ARV. You know, let's have these be the signal through the noise. Some of these things we talked about, but we just got to recap on these important aspects of comps. And first off, you know, I'm always looking for 3 to 5 comps. That's my general rule of thumb when I'm working out. Sometimes I only get 1. Sometimes I get 2. Sometimes I get 6. You know, the best practice here is the more the merrier, but we're going to have to work with what we have. And so I just want to put that limitation in the mind of anyone watching this, right? You don't need 100 comps. You don't need 15, right? I know we're going to get that question. You don't want 0. 3 to 5 always what I shoot for. Do I always get it? No, but generally that's what I'm looking for. For me to feel confident to take down a property as a fix and flip, for me to feel confident to wholesale a property. Do I always get it? No. But when I get it, do I feel confident? Yes.
Totally. And you always want to kind of develop the eye to see which comp is the most relevant, you know, because some comps might not be as relevant. They might have not been sold as recently. So there is an art to putting more weight on a single comp versus some of the other ones, but it is important because now you're collecting data on the whole market and not just putting all your eggs in one basket of one sale, one transaction that happened at one random time in history. So now you have multiple data points and you can make a better decision, and you just have more substance behind your projections, your valuation, and what you anticipate this project's outcome to be.
Yeah. And this is an important best practice, especially for someone just starting out as a beginner, because sometimes someone will just find one comp and just go with it and just say, hey, this is it. This is the value of my property. This is it. And find more. Find 3 to 5, right? It's not like, hey, the first one I find, that's it. That's my ARV. It's like, no, what are all the comps in the area that are comparable to your property? Not just, hey, find one, we're good. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Yeah, and I always love to kind of take note of why did I choose this comp? Why is this a good comp that I pulled? And if it's not like a completely renovated comp, for example, you might say, hey, our property should be able to sell for more than this one when it's fully renovated. Or if I found a flip comp, I would say, hey, this is a fix and flipper who bought, rehabbed, and sold this property, so ours should sell for a similar amount. So it's important when you're doing the work and you're in the weeds of these comps, like take notes of why did you choose this comp, because now you can intelligently speak to your cash buyers, your investors later on as to why are you putting this ARV on this property. So it's just a matter of making those adjustments and then really justifying the real estate comps and your valuation.
Awesome. And this one goes back to Leo's question too, but this best practice is that sold comps are and always will be the best comps, right? We can use active and pending comps to help us with the data, the collection, get a feel for the market, but sold, renovated comps is always what we're looking for. And so that's one of the most important things. And then always look for those sold comps that are in the best possible condition as well, right? Only those renovated comps, not distressed comps. And I know this might, if someone's a little more advanced watching this, might seem simple and basic, but we see it all the time. They're just pulling, any comp. They're thinking that there's not differences in these comps, but the renovated ones, like you stated earlier, the ones that are renovated, brand new, move-in ready, no one's lived in it before. When we see those, when we're fixing and flipping or wholesaling a house, like we go, yes, yes, this is perfect. Yep. Like we are going to be able to get our ARV down to the T. We love those types of those comps. That's what we're looking for. Do we always get it? No, but that's our bread and butter when comping. We love getting those.
Yeah, and I love to also look at when we do get those flip comps, hey, where did that investor buy the property, right? That gives us an idea of, hey, what was that investor willing to pay, especially if you're wholesaling a property? Yeah. Look at the price history too. So you can see, hey, they bought it for this much 4 months ago, and then they just resold it for this much. So this is the margin that they were looking for, that they were able to get. So that can kind of give you an idea of, hey, like, what should I be buying this at right now? So yeah, couldn't agree with you more. I love seeing those renovated fix and flip type of comps because that's ultimately the best representation of what the house is going to look like once it's been fixed and flipped.
Mm-hmm. I'm sure appraisers love them too.
Absolutely. I'm sure they do.
And then, all right, this best practice, the more recent a comp has sold to today, the more relevant it can be to our ARV. Just like we were talking about before. And you did a great breakdown of if we are looking at comp 6 months old and we wholesale a deal, do a fix and flipper, and they sell it 4 months later, it's going to be 10 months old. Mm-hmm. And so therefore, right, if we're able to find those more comps that sold a month ago, 2 months ago, 3 months ago, we can add more weight to those. Those are going to be more helpful even for the appraisal. You know, once we wholesale this deal to the fix and flipper, more helpful for us if we're fixing and flipping it for that appraisal to check out. So always remember that the more recent the comps, the better. And then Ryan, we can end on this one. So I like this one. Never speculate with the ARV or use appreciation to justify your ARV, because this goes back to romanticizing deals all the time, and we see people do it. But if all the comps are telling you, let's say you found those renovated comps that we love, use the comp criteria. You found properties that sold within 6 months, plus or minus 20% square feet. They're renovated, and they're all saying, hey, the resale price of this house, the ARV is going to be $500,000, for example. And you go to a fix and flipper, you want to wholesale this property, and you say, you know what, all the comps tell me $500,000. But I think it's going to sell at $550. I'm just going to say, hey, this is going to sell at $550 all day to this cash buyer. Number one, you're going to look freaking silly. Number two, if you ever want to be a fix and flipper and you're speculating on the ARV or saying, hey, the market's going to continue to go up, we know the appraiser is not doing that. The appraiser isn't adding $50,000 to the actual ARV of what it's going to be just because they want this deal to work, just because they're trying to up the numbers for the profit to look better. At the end of the day, if you're a wholesaler trying to do that, trying to make a deal better than it is, it's going to bite you in the butt because you're going to look like the amateur. You're going to look like the person that doesn't know what he's doing.
Totally. Yeah, we never want to break the comps, right? Yeah. That's a term that we often use. We never want to project that our property is going to sell for more than what today's comps are telling us it can sell for. So, yes, we all know that real estate's gone up significantly in value. There's been significant appreciation. Which, again, is why we want everyone here to get in the business, to not miss out on the waves of appreciation coming. But as fix and flippers, we can't factor that into our numbers, right? Like I said earlier, if you are going to be buying a property today, we want to know what it can sell for tomorrow if it was fully renovated. And that's how your cash buyers are going to be looking at properties. And it's better to be conservative rather than overestimate these ARVs, because wouldn't you rather be in a situation where you underestimated your resale price and then all of a sudden you sold it for $50,000 more than what you thought, versus the other way around where you sold it for $50,000 less than what you thought it was? Maybe that's your entire profit. Maybe that's some of the investment capital you put in there and now you're losing money, right? So especially if it's like your first deal or your first handful of deals, you want to be ultra cautious with your ARVs getting into these projects. Like, there's a lot on the line, there's a lot of time involved. And so you just want to make sure that you're very conservative going into these so that you can knock it out of the park and take these profits to the bank.
Awesome. Yeah, I love that you mentioned that. You know, being conservative is probably one of the best principles that we've used over the last decade on any deals that we've done. And I think that's why the majority of the deals that we've worked on have been profitable. And there's been very, very few that we've ever lost money on because we have been conservative from the get-go. And we've seen a lot of people trying to get into wholesaling or fixing and flipping that weren't conservative. that did not follow all these best practices we just talked about, and they get in and out of this business very quickly. They do that one bad deal that loses them $100,000, $200,000, and they say real estate doesn't work. And they're in a crappy position, honestly. And it's because they weren't conservative with their numbers. They didn't get the right education. They were speculating. They were romanticizing deals. And we want to be, what the comp criteria allows us to be, I feel like at the end of the day, is as rational as possible. And we want to be rational investors. The more irrational you are in speculating and guessing and hoping, hoping is going to get you hurt in this business. But the certainty, the confidence, using the comp criteria, that's what's going to allow you to be successful. That's what's going to allow you to, I'm not saying, hey, every single deal you're going to do is going to be profitable, right? That'd be silly. Every single deal we've done has been profitable. There is risk in this business, but the goal is to win more than you lose. And that's what I feel the comp criteria allows you to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And it also allows you to think for yourself. So, another best practice is don't rely on real estate agents to tell you what the ARV is, right? Don't allow them to tell you what your resale value is going to be, right? Real estate agents are motivated to sell properties, to get listings. So can't tell you how many times I've seen fix and flippers rely on a real estate agent to tell them what a property is going to sell for, only to be disappointed later for it not to sell anywhere near that.
Yeah.
And they've lost a ton of money that way. I've seen that numerous times. So again, the point is never rely on a real estate agent or really anybody else to tell you what your property ARV is going to be, right? This is the whole point of today's video, is to help you guys understand for yourself how to comp properties, how to pull your own real estate comps, and then determine the ARVs for your wholesale deals, for your fix and flips, and ultimately just get better as investors. So that's why we've developed this resource for you guys to really understand this for yourself, because like we said earlier, the ARV is one of the most important numbers to really nail. And we don't want to rely on software. We don't want to rely on real estate agents or any third parties to give us that number without us verifying for ourselves. So it's one of the main things that I think we want to get across today is just, think for yourself, really learn this criteria, and you guys will be implementing it and be much better off in your real estate business as a result of that.
Absolutely. And this is why we love doing deal reviews with our students. So they get that expert opinion on what a property will sell for. This is why we love working with our students, linking them up with cash buyers to get real life feedback all across the United States on what actual cash buyers are thinking the ARV is, so that they can get better at comping these properties. They can become a better real estate investor, better fix and flipper, and better wholesaler.
Absolutely.
Boom. And there you have it. I hope you enjoyed our in-depth discussion on Real Estate Comps 101 for wholesaling and flipping. Ryan and I really enjoyed this. We had a great time. And if you haven't yet, be sure to download the Real Estate Skills Comp Criteria cheat sheet at realestateskills.com/comp. Everything we covered today is in this cheat sheet for you. And if you got a lot of value from this video, please share it with someone that you know. Maybe you're a fix and flipper and a wholesaler has been sending you deals and doesn't know how to calculate the ARV. Send them this video. Maybe you're wholesaling with someone else and you're both getting started and you want to study up and become better at comping property. Share this video with them. And if you have any questions, comment down below. If you've seen the comment section in any of our videos, we love responding to every single comment, even if it's a lot of work on the weekends. We try to do it, all right? So please like the video, subscribe. Ryan and I will see you in the next one.
Thanks for watching, everybody. We'll see you in the next one.